Most people don't destroy their future dramatically. They do it quietly. One ignored habit at a time, one delayed decision at a time, one tiny compromise repeated so often it starts feeling like personality instead of behavior. And the strange part is you probably already know the habit that's slowly shaping your life. You just keep underestimating it because it looks too small to matter. That's how it starts, not with chaos, with subtle patterns. You wake up tired and reach for your phone before your eyes fully adjust to the light. You tell yourself that you'll start working in 10 minutes. Then suddenly it's noon. Your brain feels foggy, so you open another app, another video, another distraction that feels harmless because, technically, you're still thinking about improving your life. That's the trap. You can spend years circling self-improvement without ever changing, consuming growth instead of practicing it. And honestly, that realization stings a little. Because deep down, you know the difference between being interested in change and actually changing. One feels exciting, the other feels uncomfortable. At first, this feels harmless. Everybody procrastinates sometimes, everybody avoids difficult things occasionally. But here's what nobody realizes. Small habits don't stay small psychologically. They slowly become identity evidence. Every repeated action teaches your brain something about who you are, not who you want to be, who you repeatedly prove yourself to be. That's why tiny habits matter so much more than people think. Not because one action changes your life overnight, because repetition quietly rewires self-perception. And most people are accidentally building identities they don't even like. Think about it. Every time you ignore an important task, your brain notices. Every time you say, "I'll do it later," and don't, your nervous system records it. Every time you abandon routines after 3 days, part of you starts believing, maybe I'm not someone who follows through. You may never say those words consciously, but your behavior says them constantly. And eventually, your future starts reflecting them. That's when the frustration begins. You start feeling stuck for reasons you can't fully explain. You watch other people becoming more disciplined, healthier, calmer, more focused. And meanwhile, you feel like you're constantly restarting your life every Monday. New routines, new plans, new productivity systems, same emotional cycle. Excitement, pressure, inconsistency, guilt, reset, over and over. And this is where things quietly fall apart. Because after enough failed attempts, people stop trusting themselves, not publicly, internally. You start negotiating with yourself differently. You become careful about making promises because some part of you already expects disappointment. That's heavier than most people admit. There's a specific kind of loneliness in not trusting your own word, especially when nobody else can see it. You look functional from the outside, maybe even ambitious, but internally, you're exhausted from the constant mental friction, always planning, rarely sustaining. And the weird part is, you probably blame motivation for this. You think, I need more discipline. I need more willpower. I need to want it badly enough. But wait until you realize what's actually happening. The problem usually isn't intensity, it's inconsistency. Tiny, inconsistent behaviors slowly create unstable identities. Your brain stops believing your intentions because your actions keep contradicting them. That's why confidence disappears. Confidence isn't built through positive thinking. It's built through evidence, repeated evidence, and this changes everything. Because now the goal isn't becoming a completely different person overnight. The goal becomes rebuilding credibility with yourself. Slowly, quietly, through habits small enough to repeat even when life feels messy. But here's the part. People resist emotionally. Small habits feel unimpressive. Your brain wants dramatic change because dramatic change feels emotionally satisfying. You want the perfect morning routine, the complete transformation, the cinematic comeback story. But real life rarely changes that way. Most meaningful transformation looks boring while it's happening. A person writing 1 page daily, going for a walk when nobody feels like moving, reading 10 pages before bed, sitting with discomfort instead of escaping into dopamine every night. Tiny actions, repeated consistently enough that they stop being tasks and start becoming identity. That's when something strange happens. You stop performing improvement and start becoming someone different naturally. There's a version of your future that's quietly waiting on one tiny decision, not a dramatic reinvention, not waking up at 5 a.m. tomorrow and suddenly becoming that person. Not some cinematic transformation where your whole life changes in a montage with perfect lighting and aggressive music. That's fantasy. Real change is quieter than that, almost invisible at first, and that's exactly why most people miss it. Because the habit that changes your future usually feels too small to matter. A 10-minute walk, writing one paragraph, turning your phone off 30 minutes earlier, reading 2 pages instead of scrolling for an hour, sitting in silence before reacting emotionally. Tiny things, things your brain immediately tries to dismiss because they don't feel powerful enough. But the strange part is, your life is already being shaped by tiny things. You already know this. You just notice it more when the habits are destructive. Checking your phone the second you wake up. Saying, "I'll start tomorrow." Opening apps without thinking. Avoiding difficult conversations. Eating whatever's convenient because your brain feels too tired to care. That's repetition too. That's identity too. And this changes everything. Because your future is not created by intensity. It's created by repetition. The person you become is usually hiding inside what you repeat when nobody's watching. Not when you're motivated, not when you're inspired, when you're bored, when you're stressed, when you're emotionally drained. That's the real version of you. And most people spend years trying to change their outcomes without changing the patterns creating them. They want confidence without practicing courage, clarity without reflection, discipline without discomfort, peace without boundaries. But life doesn't really work that way. You don't become someone new overnight. You become someone new through evidence, tiny evidence, repeated long enough that your brain finally believes it. That's why this habit matters so much. Not because the action itself is magical, because of the message it sends. Every repeated action becomes a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. And most people never realize they're constantly voting against themselves. Every promise broken quietly reinforces, "I don't follow through." Every delay reinforces, "I avoid difficult things." Every abandoned routine reinforces, "I can't stay consistent." You may not say those thoughts out loud, but your nervous system remembers, your identity remembers, and eventually, your future reflects it. But here's the part most people miss. The opposite is also true. Tiny acts of consistency begin rebuilding trust with yourself. Not instantly. At first it feels pointless. You drink water instead of soda one day, and nothing changes. You journal for 3 nights and still feel confused. You wake up early twice and still feel behind in life. So your brain says, "See, this isn't working." But your brain is measuring transformation emotionally. Real transformation is structural, quiet, slow, invisible before it becomes obvious, like roots growing underground before anything breaks the surface. And honestly, that delay frustrates people more than failure does, because humans want emotional proof immediately. We want to feel different right away. But the people who eventually change their lives learn something uncomfortable. Most meaningful growth happens long before you feel rewarded for it. That's when the real test begins. Can you continue before the evidence appears? Can you stay with the habit before it becomes exciting? Can you keep showing up before your identity catches up to your actions? Because that gap, that invisible gap between effort and visible change, is where most people quit. And maybe you've felt that. Maybe you've restarted routines so many times that even hearing the word consistency annoys you now. Because every failed attempt started feeling personal. Like proof something was wrong with you. But maybe the problem was never your lack of discipline. Maybe you were trying to create massive emotional change through unsustainable intensity. Maybe you kept treating transformation like an emergency instead of a construction process. And construction is repetitive, slow, sometimes boring, but stable. That's the difference. Fast change feels exciting. Slow change lasts, and this is where your future quietly splits into two directions. One version of you keeps waiting for motivation, keeps waiting for clarity, keeps waiting to magically feel ready. The other version understands something most people avoid admitting. You rarely feel ready before the action. The feeling usually comes after. Confidence after repetition, energy after movement, clarity after reflection, momentum after consistency, not before. That realization alone changes people. Because suddenly you stop negotiating with your emotions every day. You stop asking, "Do I feel motivated enough?" and start asking, "What kind of person am I reinforcing right now?" That question changes behavior differently. Because identity-driven habits survive emotional chaos better than motivation. Its motivation disappears when life gets difficult. Identity stays. That's why someone who sees themselves as a healthy person eventually returns to healthy routines. Someone who sees themselves as a writer eventually writes again. Someone who sees themselves as a disciplined person feels internal tension when avoiding responsibility. Identity pulls behavior back into alignment, and this is the part nobody tells you. You don't build identity through thinking differently first. You build it through repeated proof. Action first, belief second, not the other way around, which means your future may change the moment you stop underestimating small habits. Not because small habits are cute productivity tricks, because they reshape self-perception. And self-perception quietly controls almost everything. What you tolerate, what you attempt, what you avoid, what you believe you deserve, all of it. So maybe the habit that changes your future isn't dramatic at all. Maybe it's the moment you stop abandoning yourself in small ways. Maybe it's keeping one promise daily, even tiny, especially tiny, because every kept promise repairs something internally, and eventually, the person staring back at themselves late at night no longer feels helpless. They feel trustworthy, stable, capable, not perfect, real. And honestly, that changes more than motivation ever could, because once you trust yourself again, your future stops feeling imaginary. It starts feeling possible. Quietly, gradually, then all at once. If this felt a little too real, maybe that's the habit you shouldn't ignore.